Hi, my name's Sarah. I am a former student of UQ and I did my honours in English literature. And I just really love reading because it's an activity where I can experience someone else's life. I can see the world from a different perspective, go on an adventure, but also then think about what the story is saying about how we do see the world and how we are constructing it. So I think that the world does transform through stories and ideas, and reading is where you can experience that transformation, both of yourself and of society.
My name's Tom, and I love reading because it's just so darn interesting. It's really, stimulating upstairs. I love stories, I love narratives in all their forms, so reading's really good for that.
My name's Riley. I'm an English Lit grad from the University of Queensland. I graduated last year after studying honours in English literature, and I've always loved reading. There's no one reason or experience that I can point to as an explanation, but it's always been really important to me, especially when I was younger and sort of developing a sense of self. I've always loved reading, and that definitely was only made stronger by studying English at uni. It was a really valuable experience and one that I'm grateful that I was able to have.
Who am I and why do I read? Well, who am I? I'm trying to figure that out, to be honest. I think that's what we're all doing. My name's Liv. I'm doing an extended major in writing and a minor in English literature here at UQ. And I love reading so much. I got into it probably from the Chronicles of Narnia when I started reading it around 7 or 8. I loved the world, I loved the fantasy element. I've always wanted to be anywhere but here. So our imagination is one of the most powerful things. So that's pretty much springboarded me into my literary journey of collecting and hoarding so many books. But we can get to that later, that's fine.
I got into reading with the Percy Jackson or Ranger's Apprentice, some dodgy young adult series which I'd never look at these days, but got the job done back then and stopped from just rereading the same 3 books. Expanded my horizons a bit. I think my dad got them for me. So.
Well, I read a lot more as a child than I do now. I was much more productive and I had much more time on my hands. And so I can point you to a specific book series of many that I think probably got me into reading. And in fact, I have it to demonstrate. It was the Chronicles of Narnia, but specifically it was my mother's childhood copies of the Chronicles of Narnia. That's what the series is called, isn't it? It's been a while. I can't say I've read them since my first foray, but I was 11 or 12 and I was sick. I would have been younger than that, but I was sick one time, and I got through these in about a week, and they've been through the wars. The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe typically has lost its cover, but that's my mum. That's my mum as a child, writing her name on it, so it's sweet. They're a historical artifact, and they're also the sort of one series that I can point to definitively and say was quite a formative one for me in terms of my love of reading.
Well, I've just always been reading. I actually don't remember learning to read. I've always been reading. So when I was a kid, it was the classics. It was Harry Potter, things like that. Of course, for me, it was also Ranger's Apprentice, like a boy's adventure story. I just really liked it. As an adult though, or as a teen, the book series that got me into thinking about literature more was actually Terry Pratchett's Discworld, which is a satirical fantasy of our world. I know that probably sounds quite strange, but because he was drawing so many parallels to the way politics was playing out in our world, I found it really thought-provoking as well as just hilarious.
I can't think of a specific question I'd ask my favourite author. That'd be Kurt Vonnegut, by the way. I guess maybe he had such a humanist drive in all of his writings and in his more, political practice. But in his personal life, I'd probably ask about that. Just how is it possible to actually, have that humanist drive that he had in his writing in his real life, which maybe it wasn't, but I'd ask about it.
Well, my favourite author is Agatha Christie, and there are lots of questions that I would ask Agatha Christie, murder mystery extraordinaire. One of the first ones that comes to mind is I've read that she was much more passionate about being a playwright than she was about being a novelist, and that actually she saw writing what we think of as the iconic Agatha Christie products, Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, that they were more of a easy income for her, and her real passion was the stage. So I would probably ask her what she thinks about the way that she's remembered today after her death, looking at all of the movie adaptations and also the stage adaptations of her more successful novels, and then also the endurance of some of her plays that she wrote. I mean, The Mousetrap is the longest running play on the West End, so she'd probably be chuffed to hear that, I imagine. I have to imagine. So I would ask her what she thinks about that. I would also ask her where she went that one time that she went missing, but that's an obvious question. So I would start with the plays probably.
Well, first of all, I don't know if I have a favourite author. I suppose at the moment one of them would be Robin Hobb. She's a contemporary high fantasy writer. And I am intrigued by one of her characters, the Fool, who starts as a very minor character and then over the course of the series becomes the main character, pretty much. And I'm interested to ask her when she made that choice or how that came to be, because I don't think it was intentional at the start. She didn't make the character thinking that, yes, this will be my hero. So I'd like to ask her about that.
What question would I ask my favourite author? I mean, it is C.S. Lewis, and well, he is dead, so I'd have to be courteous in my questioning. I'd probably ask him what he was most afraid of, and upon his death, looking back on it now, would he be as afraid of it? I would also ask if it was worth writing Edmund to sell his family out to Jadis just for some Turkish delight, but hey, that might have been his favourite food, and he may have loved Turkish delight that much that he's like, yeah, I'd sell out my family too. I personally wouldn't. I hate Turkish delight, but if it was like KFC, then sorry, my family's gone. I love KFC. So that's what I would probably ask him.
My favourite book trope? I do love a good quest. I'm a sucker for an adventure. But I also love the trope of like the classic showdown, like the Elizabeth Bennet versus Lady Catherine de Bourgh kind of verbal standoffs. I really love a good argument. Any book that has the tropes of sort of verbal repartee, that's what I love.
My favourite book tropes. That's a good one. It depends what genre, to be honest. I mean, if you are doing a romance, enemies to lovers is a good classical one that everyone loves. I've always loved, especially in adventure books, you know, like the little old random magician wizard guy that like pops up randomly to hand out clues to the protagonist and he has no idea what's going on. And usually he gives them in some form of like a wacky, weird, verbose riddle. It just makes no sense and makes everything even more confusing. If you've seen Melon, it's Kilgara, you'd know exactly what I'm talking about. I've always loved those, like just the classic, like random senile old guy that actually knows so much, but just for some reason wants to say it in the least helpful way possible. It is so frustrating, but it's awesome and I love it.
Well, I have to stick with my Agatha Christie theme. I love a whodunit. I love a good classic whodunit. Specifically, I prefer a closed room mystery. I prefer a discrete group of characters, some cozy English setting. It's really comfort stuff, which is grim, but not unusual. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say out loud. I don't think I'm strange for liking that. I do love a whodunit. I think I bungled that up at the end. That's okay.
Favorite book trope would be any kind of Austen little romance things, like enemy to lover or whatever was going on in Northanger Abbey. Those tropes that we've just seen done over and over again since.
I do like a good read on a balcony or a veranda in the afternoon, maybe with a glass of wine, maybe with a cup of tea. There's a slight breeze through the trees, the sun is going down, a train is driving past. The atmosphere can't be beaten.
Here is where I feel most comfortable reading. We're looking at it in my rocking chair. Good spot.
Where is the most comfortable place for me to read? To be honest, in any social situation, anywhere that gets me out of having to talk to another human being, I would love to read there. If there is a party or a gathering or anything and I have to talk to someone, I will have a book in my hand and I'll be like, oh, sorry guys, just gotta go do something, and I'll be sitting in a corner reading and Lily keeps running behind me. But that's okay, it's okay, Lily. That's probably the best place to read, is when you can escape from literal people. So anywhere that there is a big audience or big crowd, that's where I'll be reading. But other than that, anywhere in nature with trees is also a beautiful place too.
I feel most comfortable reading at home, but I can kind of read anywhere. Yes, but especially at home, I have terrible posture, so I'm always reading like slumped over the couch or something. So that's what I do.
Genres of books I like to read would include, I'm more go for period, like Austen kind of period stuff, and postmodern stuff too, modernist stuff. In terms of genre, I don't really care. I'm more about sort of what period it comes from and the author.
What genre of book do I love? That's the next question, and it's a good one because there isn't a stock standard one that I love. I love so many. My two favorite ones are probably fantasy and poetry. Quick tip, if you do like poetry or you are getting into poetry, tab your books. Tab them, annotate them. I used to hate the idea of scribbling over books and writing notes, but I personally have found it so wonderful to be able to actually, here a minute, I've got some for you to have a look at. Here, annotate your books, do it. So then you can come back and see all of your notes and think, oh, this is what I actually thought about this, because you read a book of poetry and you go, that was great, and then you don't remember anything about it. And someone's like, oh, so you've read like Lord Byron, and you go, oh yeah. And then they're like, what was your favorite poem? And you just full blank. You're like, I've got no idea. Annotate, color code. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm begging you to try it if you are trying to get into poetry, or if you do like poetry already.
Okay, I am a massive fantasy reader, all kinds of fantasy. But that being said, I also really love a classic novel. I enjoy 18th and 19th century novels a lot. Yeah, I suppose I'm quite driven by plot. So any book genre that has a fair bit of plot, I'll be there for, excluding some of the darker sort of murder mystery. I'm not really into very grim books. Yeah.
Well, I studied honours in English literature, focusing on early Gothic literature, women's early Gothic literature. So part of me wants to say the kind of Gothic scary. I've already talked about murder mysteries, but actually lately I've been reading a lot more non-fiction, and it's been a really nice breath of fresh air. I haven't spent much time previously reading very widely in terms of non-fiction, but I've been enjoying myself. So that's my answer.
Book recommendations, also that is my cat scratching at the door, so we're just gonna have to deal with that. Book recommendations for these genres. I'd say if you do like fantasy, obviously a good high fantasy is Lord of the Rings. If you haven't read it, please do. If you have read it and you're looking for other things, we've got the Wheel of Time series. It's got like 14 books though, so if you like a big series, there's always that. The Witcher as well is wonderful, though there is a bit of nudity, so I just usually skip that. So I usually, yeah, we don't do that sort of stuff. But in terms of poetry, depending on where else you wanted to go with that, you could go your classics. You've got your 3 Roberts, you've got Burns, Browning, and Frost. You've got your 3 Williams, Butler Yeats, Blake, and Wordsworth. They're all wonderful. If you're looking for any drama queens, classic drama queen, Lord Byron. Contemporary drama queen, Charles Bukowski. Goth drama queen, probably Edgar Allan Poe. That is my cat. I'm gonna have to go let her out.
Well, a non-fiction book that I finished recently, and I can show you this as well, it's called The Chiffon Trenches by Andre Leon Talley, who is a sort of legendary fashion journalist from the US. He worked at Vogue for a number of years, and it's his memoir that was published, I think it was published in 2018 or 2019. It's fairly recent. And it's really fascinating. He talks about his friendship with Anna Wintour. He dishes the goss. He does, actually. It's a very candid memoir, and also talks about his own struggles with spirituality and his sexuality and eating disorders. It's a really interesting read and a really unique and valuable insight into the fashion industry in some of its most kind of iconic or memorable periods in history.
It depends what you like. I like adult fantasy. I think a fantasy does have a reputation of being for teens, and that simply isn't true. There's a lot of people writing great adult fantasy. So if you like something that's beautiful and poetically written, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss is just beautiful. If you like humour, Terry Pratchett's Discworld, particularly my favourites are the Witches storylines and the City Watch storylines. They're both amazing, really great. If you want something a bit darker and a bit more influenced by sci-fi, I think China Miéville is doing some really interesting creepy work. His work is like, it's creepy, it's dark, it's amazing. And then my favourite, Robin Hobb, who writes fairly traditional seeming high fantasy. So, you know, nations, swords, dragons, and then kind of subverts everything to create a really intense, emotional, personal drama with characters that are incredibly well-rounded.
I would recommend, from sort of the modernist, postmodernist side, a little caught between, The Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut. It is one of his least known books, but it's also really, really good. It's really different to the rest of his work.